All right, so we are about at 12 noon. Hi, everyone. I'm Don Saucier. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center. You have found your way to the TLC Professional Development Series. We're so excited to have you, and we're going to begin today with a land acknowledgement.
Okay. Don, will you give me a thumbs up if you can see what I want? Okay, perfect. Here we go.
As the first land-grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act, we acknowledge that the state of Kansas is, historically, home to many native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home to 4 federally recognized native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac and Fox Nation Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska.
Many native nations utilize the western plains of Kansas as their hunting grounds, and others, such as the Delaware, were moved through this region during Indian removal efforts to make way for white settlers. It's important to acknowledge this, since the land that serves as the foundation of this institution was, and still is, stolen land.
We remember these truths because K-State's status as a land-grant institution is a story that exists within ongoing settler colonialism and rests on the dispossession of indigenous peoples and nations from their lands. These truths are often invisible to many. The recognition that K-State's history begins and continues through indigenous contexts is essential.
Please remember
These truths,
because we still remember.
Thank you. I'd like to let you all know that the TLC Professional Development Series meets every Wednesday in real time over Zoom. We also archive all of our events. They are available after the meeting, usually later today, for asynchronous viewing. So if you want to go to our website and find that out, if there's a colleague who might be interested in today's event and they might be interested in today's event, you can definitely point them to it and they can check that out. If you come to enough of these events and do a reflection, you can earn a TLC Professional Development Certificate. My colleagues have just dropped the information about that into the chat. We have certificates both for graduate students as well as for faculty and staff members. And if you're a faculty member who is interested in potentially becoming a TLC fellow, we have opportunities for that too. So definitely check that out. Next week, I was talking about next week before this week. Next week, the wonderful Andy Faber is going to be talking about equity in assessment, reevaluating how you evaluate students. This is going to be awesome. This is something that Dr. Faber has done for us in other capacities, and that'll be an outstanding presentation. So please be here for that. But today is going to be exciting. Some of you may have heard about this artificial intelligence stuff, and you may be aware that there's a number of events on campus this week talking about this artificial intelligence stuff. And I am so excited that Clarissa Steele today is going to be talking about artificial intelligence in higher education, a primer. So without further ado, Dr. Steele, the floor is yours. And you're muted.
Sorry, I was going to try to drop in the thing and then it was blocking me from muting myself. I'm going to drop in my file of my presentation. What I'm going to do is have a list of lots of things that you can do with AI. And if anyone wants to take notes, I want to make that easier for them to do. And also because I'm guessing some people will want this PowerPoint when I'm done. So let me just drop that in the chat right now. I can maybe drop it again. Hopefully it's not too big for the chat either. And I can drop it again later as well in case anyone wants that and they realize afterwards that they want it. So let me share my screen. Here we go. And then this is not my computer I'm used to in my classroom. So there we go. So I'm also going to say from the beginning, all of my slides were made with the AI that Microsoft has in 365, and everyone can use this. All you have to do is you can upload slides, but sometimes it doesn't work if the slides have a background that has some kind of copyright on it. But if you make your slides in 365, you can turn on what's called the designer. And I can show you how to do that at some point. It's not in my presentation, but I just want people to know that we have AI available to us and it can make our slides look pretty snazzy. So everything I've done here was made on that AI or was improved by that AI. So that's one tool that we've got that I sort of mentioned, but don't really talk too much about today. So what I'm going to do is an introduction on AI, and then most of my slides are ideas that I pulled from the internet about how people are using AI in their classrooms, and some of them are from K through 12, but they would apply to higher education, and some are people who are working in higher education like we are and using it in their classrooms or with their students. So I'm hoping to just kind of throw out ideas, and then at the end I'd like to hear how everyone else is using it, because I'm trying to use it in my classes, and I'm sure there are other ideas that I don't have on here today of what people are using it on for right now at K-State that might be able to add to what I have here. So there are different kinds of AI, and when we're talking about AI in the sense of like ChatGPT and that sort of thing, we're talking about this kind of AI called generative AI, and it's creating things based on information it has already. So the most common, and the ones like ChatGPT or Bing Chat or Google Bard or Claude, there are many, many kinds of these. The kinds that use text are called large language models. And so what they're doing is they're fed text from the internet, or they're going on the internet and finding that text, and they're learning from that text how people use the language. And then what they're trying to do is predict, when you ask for something with a prompt, it's trying to predict what it should put based on what it's found from all that text. So it's actually predicting the next word constantly, which is why if you ever use them, it looks like it's typing out. It's trying to do that prediction very quickly. Most of these large language models, if you go to any of them, and I put some names here in case you want to look at them, they will allow uploads. So you could put in articles, for example, for summarizing. Some that are very specific to finding research, like Cite, Elicit, or Research Rabbit, are connected to abstracts or some kind of database with articles. And then some can convert audio to text, like Microsoft 365 actually does have this ability in it. Noda or Otter.ai, there are other ones. I've used this recently to make transcripts from audio that I've had from interviews for research. So there are lots of different uses for AI outside of just the classroom. You can also use AI for making images. So there's different kinds of those as well, like DALL-E, Midjourney, or Bing AI Image Creator. So this is where you can get the funny images for your PowerPoints. Where you just put in a prompt of what you want the image to look like, and it'll try to create something new or original. And then you can also use it for coding, like OpenAI Codex, GitHub Copilot, or Deep Code. If you have classes where students are coding, that can be really helpful. I don't do coding in my classes, so I haven't used them very much, but I know they're quite useful for people who are trying to either create code or fix code. But this list isn't comprehensive, and these tools keep changing all the time. So I just, what I do when I'm trying to do something specific and I think, could there be an AI tool for it? I've been going to like Google or some other search engine, and I'll ask for the task that I want to do and AI and see what I can find. And these things are being made all the time. So even if there's something that doesn't exist now, it's possible in even a few days that there will be something online. Let's see if I can move forward. Let's see, there we go. So to do AI, or to use AI, any of those engines, you have to have prompt engineering. So prompt engineering is when you write what you actually want that AI to do for you. And I would say this is where you have to practice a lot, because the AI is still trying to figure out what people want, but the more you use your AI, the more it figures out what you want. So when you're doing prompts, and you'll figure this out very quickly if you put very generic prompts, like one sentence of something you want, that if you just put more description to clarify what it is you want and why you need it, that can really help in figuring out what you want to do. And also, if you can be very precise, if you know exactly what the output should look like a list or a paragraph of writing, that helps. And then I actually use it a lot in teaching for role playing. I'll have it act like one of my students in my class that does or doesn't understand the content, to see what it will output for me for an assignment or examples or something like that. So I think that's helpful. I don't spend a lot of time trying to figure out prompts. I often go on Google and find out if someone else already made a prompt, which usually they have very detailed prompts that I can use, but sometimes for very quick things, I'll write my own prompts. Any questions so far? I can't see anyone. I can only see my own slides. So please stop me if you do have questions. All right. So how do you learn how to use this AI? So you really have to practice. What I would suggest is just pick one of those AI tools. I use Bing Chat because it's connected to the internet. So is Google Bard. Some of them aren't, like ChatGPT isn't connected to the internet if you use the free version, for example. So its latest information is from like 2021 or maybe 2022, depending on what you're using. If it's connected to the internet, it's pulling information right now from the internet. So I just get on there, and when I need to do something, I'll try to figure out if I can get it to use the AI to do what I want, or to at least get something that looks a little bit like what I want. But it's not, it's kind of an art and a science. So I often don't get what I want in the first time. That's where I'm working on those prompts. But I haven't found it to be as useful. It's more useful for teaching and prepping for teaching than it is for research. And part of the problem is a lot of the sources that we use in our research, like journal articles, are behind paywalls, and AI can't go behind those paywalls, so it can't pull journal articles. And then some journals, at least in my field, this may not be true in other fields, don't want any use of AI at all when you're writing your journal articles. So I've been very careful about how I use it. So there may be some things here that you can use in your research today in this presentation, but so far I haven't really used it very much for my research, but it may be different in other fields. So there's some ethical concerns that we have to think about in using AI in teaching and in research. The good part of AI is it can save us a lot of time on tasks that we either don't like doing, or we're not incentivized in the system that we're in to focus on. So things like writing recommendation letters for students, I always use AI now because it makes it faster, but it's not something that when I go up for evaluation, for example, I'm not writing down how many recommendation letters I'm writing all the time. It also allows us to focus on what's really important in class. So being more creative and really focusing on helping our students learn the content. And it gives our students skills when they use it in class or when they use it outside of class to help them learn new content that they'll need in school and after graduation. And especially in our fields, like I'm in human resource management, people already have been using AI for years in HR. And so I want my students to understand how to use it, so when they get out, they at least have those skills, because they'll probably be expected to use it depending on where they end up working. The bad part, though, and this is, Dawn and I were just talking right before the presentation, that a lot of the presentations right now on AI in teaching are about students using it to cheat and that sort of thing. So that is one of the bad parts of AI. It can also violate like student privacy if you're putting in student writing to have it like correct student writing or give feedback on student writing, which may or may not be acceptable to students, and they may or may not know about that. It can produce bias because it's learning from what it's getting input. And if that what is being input has bias in it, which we may or may not know about, it can output that same bias later. For our students, they can really develop some unhealthy habits if they're using AI a lot. They can become too dependent on it so that they're not actually learning or doing the tasks we're asking them to do to learn the content. The quality of their work could go down. They could misuse their time by just spending all their time on AI, trying to do fun stuff, or trying to get their homework done. And they may not be transparent about how they're using AI in their assignments. So I know earlier in the semester, we talked about putting statements in our syllabi. So hopefully that helps a little bit with some of those problems in the classroom. And then students can also experience unequal access to AI tools, especially if no one's teaching them how to use it in class, so that some students do know how to use it because someone did show them, or they've been doing it on their own time, and other students are completely unaware of AI or how to use it. And this could create a lot of inequality later, either inequity in your class or inequity outside of class when students need to use it. And then, of course, the ugly is if you use AI, especially for research, but any kind of writing, it can hallucinate information and sources. So when I use it in my class, I always tell my students they have to check everything that comes out of that AI, especially if they're using it to study, because they won't know unless they're experts whether that was made up or not. Any questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Randy Nichols here. This is fascinating. It's frankly a nightmare. I'm involved in communications at a very high level.
Mm-hmm.
My students are military.
Okay.
Okay, and we are involved in GEO satellites, cybernetics. I can see where we can use AI, lots of good places, but if we're teaching our students how to use it this carefully, it kind of concerns me. Right now, we're trying to determine AI in communications being transmitted from one location to another. Mm-hmm. Frankly, terrorist communications. I would like to, you're giving us generative AI, which I understand. Are there tools that you can use to detect, mitigate, and potentially recover AI communications that may or may not be encrypted?
Ooh, I actually don't know about that. I'm sure there are people developing them. When you initially said that you were talking about the military, what I do know, this is from kind of what organizations are doing. Lots of private organizations, and my guess would be the military is involved in this as well. They're developing their own AI tools that when they input information, it's staying within their organization. It doesn't become publicly available. It's possible people are developing those tools in their own organizations to do that. And in fact, organizations like Microsoft are starting to sell those tools to other organizations because they realize that a lot of them won't allow AI use if the information could go out, if it's proprietary and it could leave that AI or could be learned by AIs around the world. But I don't know anything more than that at this point.
I actually was referring to public and open source.
Oh, okay.
Let me give you two examples. Maybe I don't mean to focus and get away from the conversation.
No, that's okay.
The first example is AI being used to put a picture of somebody, and this is practically biometric, it's that good, and say something that they didn't mean whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it usually, of course, is emotional or very heavily irritating to somebody. My point is that it can be used to be in speeches, in videos, in almost all kinds of things. That's the first one. The second one was involved in 10 incidents of American Airlines flying between Baghdad north and basically between the Iran-Iraq border and all stations in between. And we've done a great deal of work with the FAA on spoofing of signals and GPS, locational spoofing. But it occurs to me that not only can we spoof the signal now, I can spoof the spoofer. So there must be some way to know if a student gives me a paper on whatever.
Yeah.
I want to know, was this generated ethically, morally sourced, trusted, verifiable? I mean, I'm using informational terms here. And did not occur or did not have AI. Is there any way of knowing that it was, is there some copyrightable or some device that says, hey, this kid used 44% AI with Google or whatever?
There are tools that will do that, but from all the research I've seen and even the latest research in the last few weeks, those tools are not reliable because it's actually really hard to tell what was written by AI and what wasn't written by AI because AI is learning what speakers and users of that language, how they're using it. So for the classroom, I don't have this in the slides, but from what I understand in the classroom, one way to avoid that issue, and this will just be in the classroom where you actually can ask students to do something before you have them maybe use AI or do an assignment outside of class, is in class, you can have them do in-class writing where you know they're not using AI and get a sense of what their style is and the way that they write. And that way, then when they turn in future work, you can see if that style looks quite different or not. And especially if they're using either AI to write it, or they could be using AI simply to improve their writing. But if they're not documenting that, that might be something that you have to talk to students about. Do
we have a policy that could be added to the syllabus that says we're not going to accept, as a teacher, I'm not going to accept a paper that has been generated with AI?
Yeah, and I think, Dawn, correct me if I'm wrong, there's actually someone had generated a bunch of different kinds of
yes, we have
statements you can put in your syllabi.
We have resources on the TLC website that do exactly that. So my colleagues are going to drop that into the chat here in a second if they haven't already. There it is. So you can check that out.
Let me get back to what you're doing. I'm sorry I took so much time, but this is a very fascinating subject.
No worries, though. I think this is a good talk because people either may or may not be aware that this technology exists. And even if they do, they may not be aware that, for example, if we're going to feed our students writing to figure out if they've been using AI, that technology is not very reliable and we shouldn't be using it. Okay. In fact, I just saw, and this, I'm not going to remember who wrote this. There was a study this week I just read about where someone she writes blogs and she put in her blogs from 15 years ago before this generative AI worked, and then compared it to blogs that she had written through AI. And the AI detector couldn't tell a difference. It kept flagging her old blogs as AI generated, but obviously she couldn't have if she wrote them 15 years ago. So that was a really good example to me that we're pretty bad at this, even if we think we might be good at it, or AI is just that smart. It's learning that quickly and it's hard for us to identify.
I can see the day when the Honor Council, which I'm part of, is going to have either some student complaining against the teacher using it or vice versa.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I can see that. I haven't seen that yet, but it's coming.
Mm-hmm. And Dawn, I see that you raised your hand, but I don't know if you raised your hand to answer before or if it's new now.
So I just wanted to add in reference to what I was saying before, we do not have a university policy on AI. That is something we're leaving instructors to do. So what you'll find in those resources are suggestions that you can potentially wade through, but we're leaving each instructor to decide how they want to use AI in their own classes or not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
And thank you for that time, Clarissa.
Yeah. So let's move through. I think if I recall, now I have to remember what's on my slides. Yes. So the rest of these slides are really a lot of ideas of how you can use AI. I don't put prompts in here, but at the very end, I do have some resources where you can find prompts. And actually, a lot of the prompts I use are from Ethan Mollick. So I put a bunch of his specific articles in his blogs. He writes a blog weekly about AI that you can get sent to your email. I get them every week now. And he writes really good prompts and he always puts them in his blogs and they're super detailed. And I found them very useful in my class. So I've put those at the very end in resources. So if you're like, I don't know how to write this prompt, look at those first. I'm always happy to help people as well, but I'm not an expert on this as it's changing all the time. So before you get to class, you can use this to prep for your classes. And this is how I've mostly been using it in my own classes. You can brainstorm lesson plans and activities. You can customize materials. And this is something I'm still working on. But like if you have students at different reading levels, or in my classes, I have students who have different majors, so they have different interests. How can I tailor the content or the materials or examples I'm using in class to hit those student different interests in class? You can also generate common student questions to prepare for class. This is especially helpful, I think, for new teachers or new instructors, or when you're new to teaching content and you're not sure what students will have questions about. It can kind of brainstorm. This is where you would tell the AI, act like you're a student in this class. You might describe your class a little bit, what their background is on this topic, and then ask them to generate some questions about what those students might have questions about before or after they learn about the content. You can create guides, checklists, rubrics, and instructions for assignments. I use it a lot for my instructions now. It's very good at examples of as well for what I want my students to do with the assignment we're working on. You can create instructional materials such as worksheets with AI. And then you can create, as I mentioned before, more interesting slides by using AI to kind of pretty up your slides. And so I think those are really useful things to think about before you come into the classroom. And do stop me or raise your hand if you have questions as I go through these slides, because it's a lot of ideas. This is where I said it was a primer. I just went online and just started pulling people's ideas because it seems like people are using it in so many different ways. So when you're in class, when you're reading, or if you want students to read outside of class, they can ask AI to summarize a text, which could be helpful before or after they're reading to get a sense of what they're reading, or if they didn't quite understand everything that was in the reading. You can also have students create quizzes with AI, or you can create them as well for reading checks with students. And it can also develop questions and topics for discussion, either in class or on discussion boards. But I would say on reading, be very careful if you're going to upload texts for summarizing, or if you want it to create discussion questions around those texts, because you could be violating copyright by uploading them into AI. And in fact, there are many famous authors who are suing the creator of ChatGPT right now for violating their copyright by uploading lots of texts that may or may not have been publicly available legally online to teach ChatGPT. So this is an ongoing issue with AI. You also can have it help students learning concepts or understanding concepts better in class. So you can ask it for examples and applications of those concepts. This is where I use it a lot too in class to come up with different examples from what I have in my own slides. So you might list some common misconceptions or struggles that students have with those concepts, explaining steps in a concept, or if you want to add steps to concepts, you can ask the AI to alter like some kind of graphic, or if you have a list of steps, you can have it alter that to include or add other steps that you think are important. A fun one that my students like to do is explain concepts in simpler ways. So like for a third grader, or in the style of a certain author, they enjoy that because it at least makes it fun. And sometimes they actually learn a lot from that, from just seeing a different view on concepts. I use it a lot for creating analogies because I have a few workplace examples and some analogies in some of my work, but I'm always trying to figure out how to relate it to their own lives. And so those analogies from AI can be really helpful. It can also generate a list of topics or ideas, assign a topic or idea, and then you can assign a topic or idea to each group if you were doing this like in an in-class activity. And then you can have each group work with other groups to disseminate and integrate their analysis where they got the AI topic or the topic from AI, but they did their own research then after that. And then some really interesting ideas I haven't yet tried, but I thought were really cool online. People were creating, having students create public service announcements with text and image with the help of AI. So they were having the AI create the text potentially, and then just altering it or changing it to something that they liked better. And then using AI as well to create the images for those public service announcements. And then they also have used it to differentiate instruction by asking AI for suggestions for different groups of students. A lot of this was from K through 12, but I thought it would be particularly useful. Like in my classes, I have students that are non-native English speakers, that sometimes having them use AI to think about the concepts in class, or to even translate some of the concepts we're talking about in class to some words or concepts that they know in their own native language, can be really helpful too. You can also use AI to make learning more fun. So creating puzzles and scenarios to solve. I haven't done this for class, but I do have a colleague who's done this recently. She said it took a while to figure out how to get it to, she was trying to get the AI to create some puzzles where students have to figure out each puzzle to figure out like the ultimate answer to the question in class. But once she figured it out, she's been able to use it for other classes, and it was very easy, and students really enjoyed that. Another one I've done personally, I haven't done it in class yet, is creating interactive chatbots. So I think Ethan Malik has this in one of the resources I provide. You can ask, one of the examples he has is asking AI to pretend it's Marie Curie, and then you're playing the 20 questions game, and they can only answer questions, the AI can only answer questions with yes or no, and you can have students asking that AI questions and learning more about that particular topic or concept. And not only do they get to talk to Marie Curie, but they also then control a little bit more what the content is in class. So you can get a feel for what they're interested in or what questions they have. Another thing I found online that I haven't tried yet is writing a pitch for a TV show or a movie based on a concept that you're learning in class. That sounds really fun. Creating a list of something that meets some kind of certain criteria. So like a best of authors list, you can do that, and you can have very specific detailed criteria and see what AI comes up with. You can also have it tell you what its methodology is for creating that list. And then you could have students who either agree or don't agree with that list or with the methodology, and you can discuss that in class, which I think would be a really good learning technique to use, especially with something that might be slightly controversial or where people may not agree on what's the best of something in class. Any questions so far? I feel like I'm just going through lots and lots of ideas, but maybe this is sparking some ideas in your head too. It's sparking some ideas even while I'm talking about it right now for my future classes. So you can also use AI for writing and revising. And this doesn't have to necessarily be like formal writing in class for like a paper. You could also use this if you want students to write like quick self-reflections or something. You could use some of these AI tools as well in class. So you can have it brainstorm writing prompts. I think that's really common, especially around a specific concept. I know some of my students are already using it for grammar and structure feedback on writing. So something like Grammarly a little bit, but instead of having to buy Grammarly or use it, if they haven't ever used Grammarly before, they're trying the AI instead. But again, I would be careful with this, because anything that students or you upload that someone else has written, the AI is learning from that, and they may or may not be okay with that. So that might violate some student privacy concerns or any kind of copyright potentially, depending on what that written thing is that you're uploading into AI. It can also critique text and arguments, and you can use, and it can create those arguments too, and you can have your students critique the text and arguments that are generated by AI. And I saw someone who did this. They had students critique it, and they said the students came up with better ideas than the AI once they kind of saw what the AI created, and then tried to use the same criteria to make their own ideas. So that was really fun, and I think students really enjoyed that in the class that I was reading about. And then you can also compare essays that are written by students to those written by AI on the same topic. And then you can actually break apart those essays and have students see different parts of grammar or writing style and tone, and talk about how the AI did or did not do a good job and how they would improve that, which I think is really good, because I think this is the way students are really going to use AI for writing. They'll learn how to write, but they might use the AI to improve their writing. And this will help them break down what are those aspects of writing that they could really look at with the AI and that they could revise from the AI. You can also this was a really cool idea. Again, haven't used this in my class, but it sounds really fun. It's called Find the Intruder. And this is a little bit what I was saying with some of these experiments, looking at AI writing and other like human writing. You can mix up texts written by AI and those written by students. And I think this would be really fun if you had your own students writing and then you had AI create some other writing from the same prompt the students use. And then had students try to figure out which one was written by AI and which was written by students. That seems like a really fun way to show students too that AI is not perfect. You can have students develop a claim or argument and then ask AI to refute it with them so they can start debating with the AI, which might be really helpful if either sometimes my students in class are very fearful of debating. So I think I'm going to try this. I have a specific topic I love talking about in class later in my semesters. I might try to have them do it with AI and see what happens with my students thinking around the topic. They can also improve the argumentation from the AI. So I think that's where it's just like the revising writing itself, where students can pull something from AI, but then learn how to actually make it better. And then again, like I mentioned before, for non-native students, this can be really helpful. They can use the AI to translate their ideas from their native language into English. Or if I know some of you teach world languages, you could have students writing in their second, third, fourth language, and then have them translate it and see if it looks like what they were trying to say. And then for advanced learners, you could even have it do it in different styles. So I know like when I learned Spanish, the way I talk probably sounds pretty academic, but I want to try to use AI to figure out how can I say the same thing more colloquially, because I'm not very good at like using slang because that's just not how I learned Spanish, even though I studied abroad twice. So I think that could be really cool. And especially if you want to compare dialects or different words and vocabulary that are used across different languages or different areas of the world. Oops. And then you can also, this is the last slide, I think, on writing and revising. You can use it for revising text with AI for different formats or lengths. So I know some blog writers have been doing this recently where they might be academics who write journal articles, and then they have AI help them to create just a blog or a short kind of post around that specific article or writing that they had to make it shorter. You can revise text for different audiences. I'm going to use this soon because I actually will be doing a presentation with high school students and college students, and I'm going to have to revise that text or at least the presentation a little bit for those two audiences. So I think that could be helpful. You can have it expand an outline. And I've seen researchers do this a little bit where they either have AI generate an outline for a paper, or students can do this with their own essays. Or you can even have an outline and then have AI help you generate a paragraph or two to see kind of if this would work out, this outline, or what kinds of ideas to include in that paper. You can analyze an example of bias created by AI. And then the one I found online, but this you could change this to whatever is true for your field, is looking at a scenario with an elementary school teacher and a principal and having it write a dialogue. And in the example I found online with this scenario, what they found is AI will often make the elementary school teacher a female and the principal a male. And then it creates this kind of not only bias because of the genders of the people involved in the scenario, but then the way they talk to each other becomes gendered. And so that was really interesting to me to talk about that bias in fields that are outside of just teaching. And then you can also have it argue for or against AI censorship. You can have students do this, or you could have AI create something and have students critique that. So this comes from Ethan Mollick, and I think the example might be in those resources at the end of the slide deck. He said you could ask AI to use feminist theory to critique the Quran because it may break the AI because the AI is not sure how to bring those two things together. It could also create interesting arguments that may or may not have logic behind them. And that could be really interesting for students to analyze as well. Any questions? I see there's some stuff in the chat. I haven't looked at the chat yet. So, okay, they're just the resources that we've been talking about. Excellent. Do feel free to put things in the chat. There will be time at the end too, where I just want us to talk about how you're using this so that we can share more ideas than what I just have in the slide deck. And then my students, I had them do this for their first exam. I had them use AI to create quiz and test questions for themselves. So what I did is I gave them a few examples of what my test questions look like because they're often applied. And then I had them, I told them if you want on your own time, we didn't have time in class to do this, but I gave them Ethan Mollick's prompts as well for how to create test questions using AI. I told them like, try to get AI to create more questions for you that are like these so you can study the material for the exam. They can also have it create test or quiz questions and have students guess the answers to those. And then yesterday, even in class, I had a worksheet with examples that they had to guess. They were learning about reinforcement theory. They had to guess what kind of reinforcement or punishment or extinction each example was. And I had them, we did AI together in class to see if it could get it correct. And it actually did a really good job. So students were able to use that for studying for the test in the future by knowing how to create the prompt now to get AI to create those examples. You can also ask AI to generate text about a concept and have students either find or explain incorrect information, which is what I'm hoping students are doing now when they're not experts on something and they're using AI to study, or they can identify gaps or missing aspects in that information that AI has provided. This might be especially useful if students are using like ChatGPT, where it's not connected to the internet, and so they may not have the most up-to-date information in whatever it is they're asking for in the AI prompt. And I see there's something, okay, great. In the chat. And then here's some specific class examples. Again, some of this, I don't use it for coding in my classes, but I know some of you do. So I wanted to include that a little bit as well when we're talking about the classroom. So you can have AI create or write code. It can also edit code, especially if you're have issues and you need to debug the code, it can do that. Some other marketing, there were some marketing examples I found online where they're making marketing materials like taglines and social media posts with AI, which could be really helpful, especially for students. I have students who do want to work in the social media space, and they're going to have to do a lot of this at work. To figure out how to use AI to streamline some of that work might be really helpful for them. You can also ask AI to rewrite something in a particular style, or using a literary or rhetorical device that students might be learning in class. I can see this in an English class or a world language class where you're learning some of those devices, but they're hard to kind of grasp from the literature that you're reading. But one thing that you have to be cautious about in using AI is that it's not very good at doing calculations yet. So if you do any kind of math or statistical analysis, do be careful in using AI, because it might actually do it wrong, which is kind of funny because we see all these articles about AI that it's able to beat all of these tests, like standardized tests, like the LSAT and that sort of thing, but then it still can't seem to do simple math sometimes. So I don't know what's going on there, but I'm sure it'll learn. And then this is the way I use it outside of class a lot, and I just wanted to include these in case these are helpful for you in saving time at work. I use it to develop responses to common student questions, especially when I get questions around specific content. So I've taught some of my classes so many times that I often will caution to my students, this part is really difficult for most students, but then I'll also have AI when they email me later or when they ask in class later, I'll have it answer their questions. And sometimes that AI can explain something in a different way than I can that makes more sense to my students. So that's really helpful. I also have created some templates for student emails, and also for cover letters and recommendation letters. I use it a lot for, and then I'll just tweak whatever AI has written for me with the recommendation letters, trying to be careful not to put too much information where it could identify a person or private information for anything I'm writing, like a cover letter or recommendation letter. I think, yep, that's all I have for ideas. So what I thought we could do is, if anyone wants to ask about any of those ideas or have questions about them, maybe someone's using some of these ideas in class, I would love to hear about that. I'd also love to hear how else you all are using AI, because I know some of you use it even more than I do, or other people I've seen who have written some of these blogs probably do in class, and I would love to hear your ideas. You can either unmute your mic or type it in the chat.
So Clarissa, I'll get started. I don't have an answer to the question, Wade, but I'm asking, like, what's the learning curve for someone who maybe has never done this before to kind of becoming comfortable with doing something that's actually going to help them out? Because I'm thinking, if it's going to be, you know, something that takes more time rather than a time saver, it might be a rate limiting factor for some people. So what do you think the learning curve is kind of like in your experience?
My experience is it depends on the task you're asking it to do, and also what how comfortable you are with technology. And so I should say my background, I started as a computer science major, so I learned how to code. I mean, I do statistical analysis as part of my job. I'm also part of the generation that had the analog childhood and the digital adulthood, so I'm quite used to using computers. But that may make it easier for me to figure out how to use this stuff. For others, if you don't know how to use technology very well, I just showed my uncle, who's in his 70s, last weekend how to use AI, and he was so excited because he wants AI to talk about Taylor Swift and and her boyfriend now and the Chiefs and all this stuff. And his wife was like, oh my God, don't make him do that. So
Did you really not know Travis Kelce's name? Did you really
Yes.
not know that?
I was like, yes. I was like, every time I say it wrong, and I'm like, ugh, I'm not going to say it here. Yes. So Travis Kelce. So we had it right. Some song lyrics to her next song after they break up. What will her song be about? Travis Kelce. So he loved that. And so I sent him some other resources, and he was having fun once I showed him. It was pretty easy to just start playing with the prompts. I don't know if he's going to get very good at it, but that's where I said, just practice. Pick one of those platforms. I use the Bing AI. You just have to have a Microsoft login to use it, and it will remember you. So once you log in, every time you use it, it will remember you. And theoretically, it's getting better at figuring out what you want if you keep using it, and just start practicing for fun. The things that are easiest, I think, to use AI for are small tasks. So like making examples or analogies for class, where it's just like you want a few examples of something and then you can use them in class. What's harder is if you have specific ideas for bigger assignments. So like my colleague, for example, who was trying to use it to create these kind of clues to have her students figure out some bigger puzzle in class. It took her a couple of hours to figure that out. I don't know if she got exactly what she wanted, but that's the kind of stuff that I'm like, I don't have time to do that during the semester, but that's the kind of stuff I would love to do when I have more time, during the breaks or something, or when I'm just messing around with AI, because it's hard to get it to figure out exactly what you want, especially if you have an idea of what that looks like, but it's a very big project or a very big activity that's not just something very simple. So I don't know if that helps people to get a start, but just try it for like normal tasks if you're afraid to use it in class or with your students or anything for class. Maybe something you already know how to do, like recommendation letters. I already had a template, but once I figured out AI could do it faster and make them a little bit different from my template, that made it easier to use it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Any other questions or ideas of how you've used this? I know some people use this. I know even Brandon Savage has used this on our meetings to do like Dr. Seuss poems of what we're talking about that day. I know some people, I think he was one of them, has told me he's done this. He uses AI during meetings to listen in on the meetings, and then afterwards he has it create like an outline of notes from those meetings. I don't use it for that way, because if anyone who's ever met me and seen me in person, I write like just furious notes during every meeting, so to get it in my head. So I don't do that, but that's a great way to save time, especially if no one wants to take notes, but you need some kind of set of notes for a whole group. Is there anyone who wants to use AI and hasn't tried it yet?
So
or hasn't tried it yet with your classes?
There's now a question in the chat for you.
Cool.
I can read out loud if you want.
Mhm.
It's could you talk about how you properly silo AI if you allow it for some assignments and learning activities, but not for others? And how do you prevent creating a gateway drug?
Okay, so this is the bad answer that I'm going to give you. I got rid of my writing assignments this semester so we could use it in class and spend more time on it in class instead of doing the writing assignments. So we do small writing assignments in class instead of, I used to have them write a 2-page executive memo, but I'll eventually put it back in. I just want them to figure out how to use it right now. And when I polled my class at the beginning of the semester, I think I had only 8 students out of 50 in each of my 2 classes who have ever used it before. So at least for a lot of them, it's just completely new. I would say the best thing, and Dawn, I'm so glad you put these up there, the policies for your syllabus, not only putting that in your syllabus, but talking to students and even showing them examples in class of if you want them to use AI, how to document that AI. And most of the styles that we use, like I use APA style in my classes, they have a way of showing how to document that in formal papers as well. And then just showing students how to document it, how to use it, to make it okay to use, but then put some limitations around how you want them to use it. If you want them to check their writing and show them how to do that in class, I think that's okay. But then if you tell them, do not have it actually create the writing for you, I think you're going to get more students comfortable with using it, but also understanding what those limitations are. Because I think for a lot of students, when people don't address it in class, it's not clear to them whether they're allowed to use it or not. And some students will err on the side of using it for everything, whether you wanted them to or not. And some may never use it at all. And not only does that create problems for you around what you wanted them to do, but also it creates inequity then, where you have some students using it and might get a better grade and others who aren't using it at all because they're afraid to use it. So I think being very clear with them, and maybe even showing them how you use it if you do, in your life, to say it's not like a bad tool, because to me it's not a bad thing. They're going to have to learn how to use it, but how to use it properly is we're kind of in that mess right now.
So
I don't know if I answered your question.
you did. You're doing great, and you're inspiring lots of thoughts here.
Awesome.
I have another question. I'm going to tell you the question, then I'm going to give you kind of a story to kind of set context for it. The question is, as instructors, right, as teachers, like what do you think of the ethical boundaries, kind of on a use of AI? Because I know that number one, a lot of people have kind of, they see it as cheating, right? ChatGPT equals cheating. So using it as an instructor be something that kind of they might have a moral issue. And I think Dr. Nichols talked about that a little bit earlier, kind of are we cheating and using it? The story I want to kind of tell to set context to kind of get your thoughts on, kind of these boundaries is I was at a workshop last year done by the English department. It was amazing. And I think Philip Marsloff was giving this wonderful talk on uses of AI. And the whole tenor in the room at the time, all fact, like, oh my God, the kids are cheating. Oh my God, the kids are cheating, right? Kind of thing. And then it got to a point where he put in an essay and he said, all right, provide rhetorical feedback on the essay. And it pointed out the grammar mistakes and all the kind of stuff. And the person says, like, oh my God, we can use this to grade, kind of thing. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, where are the boundaries on what AI should be used for as us as instructors? I mean, we've talked about setting those parameters for students and we all get to think about that, but what, if any, are the boundaries on us?
Oh, that's a good question, because I didn't put it in here because this is ever changing. And so my answer, I'm going to tell you, this comes from, I went to our annual management conference in August, and I went to an entire session around AI in the classroom. And we talked about grading, and the people who were there actually had done an experiment to use AI to grade to see what would happen with the grades, and then had the graduate students who usually grade the writing use rubrics, and then compared what the AI did with the rubrics. And they were very cautious about using AI. The number one reason I wouldn't use it necessarily for grading, for example, is if you input your students' writing, you may be violating their privacy, but also it's learning from that writing. So they may not have given you permission to do that. And so that might not be a good thing. But what they found was it wasn't very accurate. Even if you gave it a rubric, because it's learning from each student that's being input, it could be starting, like, they're not consistent grading even on the rubric after you've input so many students, because it's learning from each of those students. And so it was like messing with the machine learning that was happening in the AI. But also sometimes the feedback wasn't very useful. It was vague. It wasn't even like on point. Hopefully it can get better. So maybe it can make some of that harder grading a little bit easier, or you could use it like a graduate student where you are also grading, and just to see how it does. For simple grading, I don't know if it would be worse, because they didn't do that. They were doing essays. I don't know if that would be helpful to grade. I feel like things where there's a template might be more useful.
So are there things right now kind of that we should and should not use AI for?
Oh gosh.
Kind of thing. So, and I just, yeah. And I realize it's not a black or white question.
I was going to say, this will be a discussion now. Yeah. I was going to say, anytime you have to upload student, like anything they wrote, that I would be very weary of using it for anything like that. I hadn't really thought about this for more than that, because I think a lot of us are just using it with writing a lot now. And the way I'm showing my students to use it is actually the way I'm using it to create things for them, but I want them to use it for studying. So I don't know if anyone else has other thoughts, or if you've seen it used in other ways by professors, because that was the only time I've ever heard anyone use it for grading, because everyone's kind of scared of using it for grading right now that I'm aware of, and they didn't have very good results with the grading.
So Dr. Nichols has his hand up. You also have a question in the chat that I'll cue you to, and I can read that to you after Dr. Nichols' question.
Yeah.
I love that you are so enthusiastic here. All right. And I hate to be the little guy on the shoulder that says, wait, think about this for a minute.
Oh yeah, no, we're in that moment. Yeah.
I don't want to stop any of the enthusiasm, because I think every technological improvement is great. But I used to be with the Secret Service, and I don't know whether you know it, one of their very big specialties is identifying people and across borders, financial deals. The area that we were working with was identification of faces, facial recognition, where AI is used quite effectively to identify people at distances. You get a very piece of a face. And so we learned to move the face around and up and down and so on. And we were trying to stop pornography, not pornography directly, but child exploitation, which is a horrible crime. So I'm seeing and one side, wow, look what we can do with all this.
Yeah.
This is just terrific. I can help with the grading. I can put people, I can expand their minds. I have a chance to really get into an area that's very different and expanded in 1,000 different ways. I also see it as a huge, because of the work I'm doing now in drones and satellites and so on, as a huge invasion of privacy. For instance, let's take your grading algorithm for a moment. It's not perfect, as you know. I would, the same information that's in the meta side of the language. That means the coding that you're using that says A equals B equals C and so on, has a name, a number, an address, a student ID of some form, a WW1, a teacher, so on. All that information is collectible by AI, and you don't even know what's happening.
Yeah.
Now, what do I do with that, you ask? Okay, I can put it together in a database. This was done in 2016 by an adversary and looked into the human resources and technical DoD database that got everybody who had a classification, and it gave everything, their families, their names, and so on. So I think if I had a recommendation, the little guy on the shoulder, if you will, I love what you're doing. And I also see on the other side that there's an ugly side to this, that if not under control is a problem. And when Don said a moment ago, I'm sorry, I've lost my voice a while back. When Don said we don't have a policy, at least a guidance issue, I just wrote the Honor Council. And I'm sorry, guys, I ratted you out. And
Well,
I
we've had Camilla involved in us, so we're good with the Honor Council.
I didn't know if you knew. Okay. Well, Camilla's a wonderful lady, and I love working for her. But at the same time, I said, I just learned that we don't have a policy on AI and thing. I see some potential issues coming in the future. Has this been addressed?
Camilla told us we shouldn't have a policy. We should let it up to instructors. So I'm just saying we're good with administration.
Standing right in. Okay. Well, anyway,
I think you're bringing up some excellent points, because it's different in each of our fields, right? In your field, the privacy issues are of top concern. And I tried to point out where it can be even a concern for us in classrooms. But I know in my field, it's already being used for resumes. And then there's, of course, a lot of research on bias in that. So it's like, what do we need our students to know so they're AI kind of fluent when they leave K-State? And then how much should we tell them about the ethics, which I think is important to talk about too, in your field or just generally around AI. But we're also in that kind of squeamish space where we are not sure how to use it yet. We haven't come up with rules. We're all kind of trying it out. It's just like the internet in like the 90s to me. Like we all wanted to get on, but then we weren't aware of sometimes the implications.
But not all these things are open source. For instance, I don't control anything in Google. And Google has an awful lot of, in fact, it has as many as 200 identifying pieces of information, everything from cookies to persistent threats and so on. They come every time you touch Google.
Yeah.
It knows where you are, who you are, what, and so on. And I'm thinking that this could be used very poorly.
It could. I agree.
Or very well too,
Yeah, and I think that's why when like organizations, so this is what I'm having to teach my students now, to say that organizations are actually creating their own proprietary AI for those very reasons. They want to use it, but they can't have their employees putting anything up in AI that could, they could be learned by the system. So, but I think that's going to be different, field by field too. But I also hope that this is like the beginning of AI presentations we have with TLC and around campus. I mean, we're having AI week now, so we can at least start discussing this because our students need to know about it, I think. But there's always the good and bad that we also have to teach them about, and the ethics about using AI.
Thank you for showing me that there's a guy on this side of the shoulder, a gal on this side of the shoulder that knows better than I do. So thank you.
Oh, there's both sides. I also want to respect that people are writing a bunch in the chat. So Meredy said, I find it really helpful to help me reword discussion posts, sentences, and overall just get my point across with more clarity. I think more of a way to provoke more ideas. I completely agree with you, Meredy. I found it super useful at re-explaining things that I've explained that I think are clear. It explains it a different way. And my students get that sometimes when they don't get what I'm saying. Matt says, if AI can already grade discussion boards and offer feedback to students, then is this really more a question about the agency of faculty over our educational institutions and how we imbue the possibility of that agency in the future context that students will find themselves in their careers and lives? That is, how can we be responsible cyborg, as Donna Haraway would have it? Oh, this is a good question. This is where I was hoping kind of some of our discussion would lead to, like, what is our job in this? Because still have a role to play in teaching content, helping to grade, helping our students understand the expectations we have, but also what they're going to face when they graduate. It's not completely clear to me what AI's role is in that yet, because it's changing all the time. But I don't know if other people have thoughts to Matt's question. I think that's a really good ethical question. And maybe this is the concern for everyone in all jobs. Like, what will AI do that I do now? And then what will my value still be once AI can do a lot of this work? Any thoughts? Anyone have any ideas? I don't think we're out of a job. I mean, okay, so I don't know who this is because it's just their name on their profile. I have Llama 2 running on my laptop, so using an LLM for grading doesn't necessarily imply publishing students' information to the internet. Good. So there are ways to get around this. I was gonna say there's lots of tools out there. I haven't even used most of them. I didn't even introduce most of them. So that's one I'll look up. I don't know what that is. So that's awesome. And then Teresa says, I listened to this podcast recently that I found interesting. Teresa, do you want to say anything about this podcast, what it's about?
So it was talking more kind of about the, dark side, or the maybe we need to kind of slow the roll on all of these developments, and just how so many other things are regulated, and we've taken time to really think everything through, and AI is just expanding and developing at such a high rate of speed that it was just an interesting podcast to listen to. It made me think about things that I hadn't really thought about, because you hear about AI and all these cool developments, and it is really exciting, and you want to use everything, but yeah, taking time to just kind of like think things through a little more.
Yeah,
it's about an hour. I listened to it over my lunch break.
Is it does it talk about was it the group of scientists in September that wrote like an editorial where they want us to pause AI?
Yeah.
Is it based on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's actually one of the authors of that was being interviewed and talking about it and some other things. So yeah, it was good.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, this is where we're in like the weird space, and I have a feeling we might be in the weird space for a little while with AI, because I know there's new AI coming out, like even some of like ChatGPT and those sorts of things. There's going to be new versions coming out with different abilities than what they have now, but I just don't think we have a very good grasp of what it's doing and what the implications are. It's so new. I mean, we weren't even talking about AI a year ago, definitely not in this space. So
Clarissa, if you had a final thought to offer us today to conclude, what would that thought be?
The reason I made this presentation this way is because I think our students have to learn about AI. I think we're doing a disservice if we do not teach them about AI and how to use AI. But I agree with many of the concerns and comments that we've even talked about here. We have to teach them about the ethics of AI as well as how to use AI when they get out, because that's part of using AI responsibly and also just being a good citizen of the world. So I'm just throwing ideas out there in case anyone wants to use it and try it. But I think our students are probably well ahead of us, and they definitely need to use this before they graduate, so they know when they get out to the real world and have to do this in their jobs that they at least know what this is and have some familiarity with it.
Well, Clarissa, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. Please join me in thanking Dr. Steele for all of this wonderful information. I'll remind you that this event will be archived on the TLC website. Dr. Steele is also providing slides that we'll put along with that presentation that you can go through and pick up wonderful tips and things for using AI in our teaching. Also point out we have a post-event survey that my colleagues have dropped into the chat. We also have the opportunity for you to earn a TLC Professional Development Certificate. My colleagues will drop that information in the chat yet again. I want to remind you that we meet every Wednesday at noon in real time over Zoom. We archive all the events, as I mentioned. Next week, Dr. Andy Faber is going to talk about equity assessment, reevaluating how we evaluate students, and I hope that we see you there. So thank you so much for taking some time on your Wednesday early afternoon with us. Thank you again, Dr. Steele, for a wonderful presentation, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you so much.